Hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. Today, I'm joined by Natalie Menten, one of Colorado's Liberty leaders, to discuss Colorado's property taxes. Well, Natalie, how are you today?
Doing great, thanks.
Wonderful. Well, really appreciate you taking the time to join me and give us an update on what's going on with property taxes. It was a crazy legislative session. Of course, there's some competing ballot measures. There's just a lot going on. So let's dig in.
Sounds good.
Perfect. So one of the big bills this year on property taxes was Senate Bill 24111, the Senior Primary Residence Prop Tax Reduction. So a bill definitely targeting seniors, of course, a very important voting block. Can't fail to mention that. But a very interesting bill here. What do you know about this one?
Well, the senior property tax discussion has been going on for a long time. As you described it, when it comes to elections, appealing to seniors with this type of a waiver backfilled by the state is an election matter. So you're going to see a lot of campaign literature using this example of how they help sponsor the bill. But what it does is basically shifts that tax burden from local districts being paid across the board to seniors not paying as much. And so, therefore, others that aren't considered non senior for this case are therefore paying more. So, it really is creating a special class of taxation, whereas just cutting taxes across the board is the most fair way to do it. Because when I talk to seniors, I ask them as an example, so your grandkids, are you concerned about cost of housing? How are they going to invest in their future? And they're like, oh, yeah, yeah. And then you talk about, well, with the property tax um, support, who is actually funding that? And you say, so, your grandkids are paying more because you're getting this waiver. Then they start to rethink these kind of things. So it really is coming down to it. And there might be some people just say, well, I don't care regardless, but it still is a factor in the economics of it. So there's different political groups, different political thought processes. People follow different trains of thought, as you should say, who have always thought senior exemptions really are just shifting a burden from one generation to another without any kind of income testing. And that's especially part of it. So that was a little bit of a long description, but different varying thought, because there are a lot of people to say, oh, yeah, it's good, but there is a cost involved to it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point because, I'm all in favor of lowering taxes, especially for seniors, people in fixed income, people who are struggling to make those ends meet with all the high inflation. But, it's always suspicious when you see the governor do one of his big, signing statements or signing presentations, his little PR thing, and release this wonderful statement about how he's lowering property taxes, and using this as a little campaign ploy, it seems. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Liberty Scorecard brought that very similar point here. Liberty Scorecard, if you don't know, wonderful organization that tracks most of the legislation going through the state capitol and kind of rates it depending on different liberty values. So they said they oppose this bill because it created a special class, shifts the tax burden to everyone else, and also violates Tabor. So, so many of these bills, they claim they're saving people taxes, but they're just making somebody else pay for it.
Yeah, and another part of what factors in with these kind of things is that people think, well, it's just my bill's discounted. That's it. That's all the factor. Well, what occurs is the local government is still expecting that money, and the state has to backfill it. And so there's a lot of money shifting that goes on with that. And it ultimately comes out to the government defining the terms on reimbursement. So again, whereas a flat, like equalized tax, and we're going to talk about one of the things here is one of the challenges in this bill that was passed is it increases where seniors' social security number is going to within the government chain of custody, let's call it, because now there's this expansion where instead of seniors having just these set boundaries on how they use that credit, it's wider. So therefore, there's more travel in how that data is verified and secured. So therefore, being the unique identifier, the social security number now is going into more hands too. There's fair ways to cut taxes, and we're going to talk about those.
Yeah, let's take a look at the fiscal note here from this bill. So, fiscal note always tells another side of the story that some of the legislators or the politicians don't necessarily like talking about. For example, here, there's a net Tabor refund change of zero because they are taking that Tabor refund money here, $34.1 million. For fiscal year 25-26, another $43 million fiscal year 26-27. So when you're really talking about what's going to end up being hundreds of millions of dollars of tax refund money, people's tax refunds that they should get back, and using that, like you said, to backfill some of these local governments and pay them off so they don't have to cut their taxes in order to provide this very limited tax relief for these seniors.
Yeah, yeah.
So moving along, Natalie, you've been warning about some of these issues for a long time. You've done some wonderful articles, some great opinion pieces out there. This was back from February 13th, 2024 in Colorado Politics. Voters were duped out of control over property taxes. Definitely a major issue there. We've talked about this last year in our property tax series leading up to Proposition HH, and thankfully that being defeated. But really, that annual levy law and, of course, the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights protections. So I really like this article. Definitely will link everything here for people to read, to go back to. But I think one of the key lines here uh, that you wrote: if governments are not at least capped at economic growth, how is it reasonable to expect taxpayers to keep paying in more than they are earning? It's a wealth transfer scheme that doesn't end well. So very well said.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we've been having this discussion for so long with the property taxes. You and I've had done video in the past, I know more maybe than once, about how what really started the discussion for the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights was about property taxes. And Douglas Bruce, looked in and said, wait, there's all these other mechanisms that the government is gaining revenue. You really need a cross-border umbrella kind of a thing. Um, and the annual levy law, which was put in law decades ago, just doesn't have the abilities to cap government reasonably like Tabor does. So we just have been having this discussion for so long. So it's disappointing. We've investing still a lot of time in legislature, as they've described. We're going to talk about in a minute here. Thinks they've come up with some solutions, and they have not. So we really need to re-Tabor. So people talk about de-Tabor. We need to re-Tabor around Colorado, which basically means simplified that for us, where property taxes are concerned, a local government gets to grow by inflation plus local growth. Local growth is construction. People say, well, if that doesn't keep up with population, well, but if you have local growth, construction, people coming in need a place to live. So therefore, that population is part of the factor anyway. And those are those economic means that is better to allow government's growth versus perhaps maybe more, well, we'll talk about it in a minute here, but some options. But when you are faced with just doing these other options, the government will decide. So anyway, let's keep going.
Yeah, definitely. No, some of the videos we've done in the past, as well as the articles you've written since then, really warning these legislators that they need to cap property taxes reasonably. They need to follow the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. They need to follow the annual levy law. And really, that is the solution. So, unfortunately, the legislators didn't listen entirely, which brings us to Senate Bill
Yeah.
233. So, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So 233 really was generated after months of the Property Commission on Property Taxes meeting. They started at the end of December and they continued with a date scheduled. March 15 was the day that they were to have a proposal together. Well, I attended every one of those meetings actually in person leading up to like the last couple. And then I was able to get in by Zoom link, so it was much more convenient than going down there. But starting at the beginning, um, they took a pulse of what the 19 member commission members wanted to see out of what they believed they were tasked with going there to do. And it was interesting to see the variety of responses to that. But one of the things that they were polled on as to a result from the commission potentially was a cap on property taxes. And it polled almost dead last, if not last, during those open early meetings. So as worked through it. Meanwhile, on this other sideline, not sideline, actually, it's like the property tax commission was on the sideline, and the main game was Advance Colorado and Colorado Concern pushing these ballot initiatives through. And, the commission is over here going, well, we've got to react because they're going to do something. So they came out with this, nearly close to the end of the session, Senate Bill 24-233, which we'll go into a little bit more detail, but it's getting the job half done. That's basically the end result here, because what they were supposed to be tasked with was they sold the voters on getting rid of the Gallagher Amendment, which basically capped residential tax, basically said, get rid of Gallagher, we're going to get rid of some flaws, and then we'll come up with a better permanent kind of a solution. Well, this is what they say 233 is. Well, no way. I'm sorry. I point out countless things that fall short. And we can go into detail, but I think this is a good time because otherwise then I'll forget. They were going to do the bill signing. So, we can go into again more ways that bill signing things, and they advertise it and tell people about it that they want to be there, but they don't advertise it and tell the average person to show up. So I wanted to go to this 233, this property tax bill signing, and I'd overheard it was going to be in Jeffco. So I kind of dropped everything because I'll do that, and I went out to my garage because I have a lot of coal blast, and I actually recruited one other person last minute, because again, they don't tell the average person. They won't want any protesters in any of these things. I don't know that it would protest this, but I felt it was important to go to this thing and say, this, can you see it all right?
Perfect. Yeah, see it perfectly.
Okay, so that basically sums it up. That's what's in Bill 24-233, this permanent type solution that was supposed to replace Gallagher. That was my opinion. Not enough, and see you in November. But it was a good thing I did go to it anyway, because then it turns out they had a debenture mansion up in the mountains, a taxpayer funded thing that actually. All
So
right.
yeah, Senate Bill 233, definitely not enough, not really doing what it should be doing. And these politicians shouldn't be getting the credit they think they deserve for this wonderful property tax solution. Looking at the summary of the legislation, just to give people a little bit of an idea, the bill makes changes to property valuation assessments beginning in the 2024 property tax year, imposes a property tax limit, which is this 5.5%, and makes changes to the property tax deferral program. All of its provisions take effect only if voters do not approve 2024 ballot measures, which we'll talk about briefly here, that either reduce valuations for assessment and or require voter approval for retaining property tax revenue that exceeds a limit. So, it sounds like a good idea on paper, right? They're going to limit how much property taxes can increase. We see a lot of these legislators all over social media talking about how they're going to lower property taxes for the people of Colorado. The governor, saying he's doing the same. But let's take a look as well at the Common Sense Institute, is nonpartisan think tank here.
Let me pause. Let me pause for one moment and just go to something I don't think they'll be brought up in the other slides. I don't want to leave it out. When they're putting that cap in, it does not apply to home rule jurisdictions, which home rule jurisdictions include the multitude of the larger cities. So that's an example of where 233 falls short. While saying it has a cap, they don't tell the average in their press release conference that, oh, by the way, it's not going to include all the governments. They don't say, oh, it's not going to include schools because we're also running this other measure over here where now we've separated assessment rates. So schools are the largest line item on a property tax bill. So there's no impact to speak of in this on what is the largest line item on a property tax bill, and then home rule jurisdictions, which are going to be third on your highest top amount. And it will be more motivation for different entities to become home rule. All right, go ahead. Keep going with slide 3.
No, definitely great point to bring up, Natalie. Here's from the bill summary on the legislative website. This property tax limit does not apply to local governments that are home rule local governments. School districts have not received voter approval to exceed the statutory 5.5% property tax revenue limit, or have not received voter approval to collect, retain, and spend revenue without regard to the limitations in Section 20 of Article 10 of the state constitution, the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. So definitely a way that they're sneaking around. The issue here, not actually really capping property taxes uh, too much at all, unfortunately, compared to what they should
No, they're
be.
just slowing the increase or minimizing these gaps because we don't even know that we're out of a peak yet right now. While the interest rates out there have certainly chilled the real estate market, um, who knows what the feds are going to do? So all of that's unknown, and to see it continue. All right, go ahead.
Perfect. So yeah, just taking a look here, people can go to the legislative website to look a little bit more information. But Common Sense Institute, they have a really key line here on their report where it says bottom line. Kind of blew that up a little bit here, copied it. So this is from the Common Sense Institute, co.org. Under Senate Bill 24-233, Coloradans will still see an increase in property taxes from what is being paid today. Next year, Colorado homeowners will pay the same elevated amounts from the spike in 2023. In 2025, the same year as the next reassessment period, property tax rates will increase, setting Coloradans up for another increase in their property tax bills. Here's a big bold line here. Crucially, any assessment of this bill should refer to what Coloradans currently pay in property taxes, not what they would pay if the actions from prior sessions were to sunset. Senate Bill 24-233 comes at a time when the average Colorado household is spending $1,230 more per month due to inflation compared to what was spent in 2020. So there's the bottom line, folks. This does not stop the increase in property taxes. It does not decrease property taxes. It just slows down that growth, like you said.
Yeah, and for a lot of those rural jurisdictions, one of their larger revenue sources is sales tax. And you said in the last line there, the additional inflation that people are paying, that means you're paying more in sales tax too. So, the government prop anyway.
No, it's a great point. I mean, the government, like you said, is collecting more sales tax. They're collecting higher property tax amounts. I mean, they're getting all the money, but we're not just working class, regular Coloradans are not seeing any type of increase, especially not to keep up with all these increased tax burdens.
Yeah. And I think the disposable funds that people have are starting to diminish. And I think we're starting to see it with restaurant closures, some of that more, the things where there is more flex. Maybe Uber Eats and all that has some impact, but um, it's just been going on too long with the fuel, energy cost. Anyway, go down. I won't go down there rabbit hole.
So this slide here, Natalie, you got from the Colorado Department of Local Affairs from their recent here in June report that they put out. You want to tell us a little bit about this?
If you look in the outer years, 2026, 2027, even 2025, those outer years, the impact of what 233 did. So as somebody's looking at the screen, remember 24, 111 is the senior issue. The 24-233 is these adjustments to the assessment, which is part of the formula, the equation that generates what your property tax bill is. You'll see changes in 2024. For instance, vacant land. Instead of 29%, it's 27.9. Residential. Drop down, I'm sorry. Let's go to like commercial. Again, a small decrease, 27.9 instead of the 29. In those outer years, what is occurring is they jump right back up to what are full-blown rates. So where's the property tax relief really when you are looking at those assessments? And this is another example of it falling short. There's consideration for residential, but along with vacant property owners, commercial, all of those different ones are taking a blow from a market that continues to grow. So the real point of this slide is that Governor Polis, as he proudly signed the bill up at Betcher Mansion in Golden, Colorado, and had next to him Chris Kennedy, DeGroy Kennedy, and other politicians saying, we've given property tax relief to Colorado. What they actually again did really was put a band-aid on something and left the taxpayers as pawns in manipulation of whatever they want to do the next legislative session and then the following legislative session, continuing on and on and on and on. And this all goes because people waive their Tabor rights. So we need solutions. So there, I vented a little bit, but wanted to explain a little more. And now we'll go on to where we do have solutions coming up.
So some of the effects of this, kind of a description from Dola here.
Yes. So this is where instead of the assessment rate, the additional component in this is exempting that first, a portion of the first, exempting a portion of the taxable amount. And it started out with there used to be like 30,000, then it jumped to 50,000. Now it's 55,000. Again, property tax 2024, and then a different adjustments in the following years. And I don't know that there's anything to say that the years 2025, 2026, any of this is going to apply by the time we get to that, because we have 2 more legislative sessions before then. And you'd have this trend of where they just go in, they change things, and they come back and change things again. So I don't even know how much I would count on it.
Yeah,
So now
very
we go
good
to the
point.
next.
Definitely.
And
So
introduce stuff uh, within the last 3 weeks of the session,
yeah, an
where you
unfortunate
can go
pattern.
down and have the privilege of testifying for 2 minutes.
Yeah,
Right.
unfortunate pattern down there at the legislature where these politicians are waiting for the very last minute to push these policies through with, yeah, very little public scrutiny, very little capability of the public to show up to testify to get involved, unfortunately. But here's an
I
article
think
from
I think
yeah, go ahead.
it's a good one. Last thing, I'm sorry, I know we're trying to keep this short, but one thing to mention is, there's supposed to be public feedback on the whole process, from when Hansen started the Commission on Property Taxes back end of December. And I walked up along with Senator Mark Baisley, to Hansen and said, is there going to be public comment at each of these meetings? And Hansen said, yes, there's going to be public comment at each one of these meetings. Guess what? They didn't have public comment at each one of those meetings. So they continued with presentations, blah, blah, blah. And towards the end, they had the 6 regional meetings, 8, whichever it was. Really not great attendance. And so it just comes down to, well, I don't think they heard people. And I think people kind of given up in a way they did because, Prop HH came out and the whole deal there was it impacted Tabor. And that was their trade off. Well, this year, I mean, they totally just screwed us over because they gave us 233. And yeah, it doesn't affect Tabor. But meanwhile, over here on the other field where they're playing the game, they took away X amount of Tabor refunds from people with half dozen, 2 dozen bills that we'll cover in another one of these broadcasts. All right, let's go to this article. Why we should not let them be moving the chess pieces, and why we need to be in control.
Yeah, 100%. We can't be duped into giving up our control over these taxes, like you said. I mean, that's the beauty of what Colorado's constitution is supposed to be about. Article from AP News here. With home prices up more than 50%, some states try to contain property taxes. So there's a really good section in this article about Colorado. Of course, all these links will be posted at freestatecolorado.com where this video is at, so you can find all these there. But a big thing here that Colorado voters repealed the Gallagher Amendment, as we know, in 2020. Since then, assessed home values have risen rapidly. The General Assembly has responded, or so they say. The latest law, signed in May, is projected to shave over $1 billion annually off future property tax revenue by reducing tax rates and imposing growth limits, which we just went over is pretty weak sauce, pretty weak, not really going to do what they say as
You
much as
call
they
it
need
weak
to.
sauce? Did you
I
call it
called it
weak
weak
sauce?
sauce.
That's a good name. Kind of like that
Continue.
wimpy barbecue stuff, like what does that even come for?
Right.
Anyway,
It's just weak sauce. But that's not enough to satisfy some residents. This is the article. The conservative group Advance Colorado backed a citizens initiative asking voters in November to cap all property tax revenue growth at 4% per year and is gathering signatures for still another ballot initiative to lower property taxes. Quote, people are saying this is too much growth. Government doesn't need this much money. And quote, Advance Colorado President Michael Field says people are genuinely scared of losing their houses.
Yeah, and I gotta say the couple here they got in the picture, that is Bev and Tom McAdam, and they are long time Tabor supporters out in Jeffco. So it was really nice to see their picture in this AP article
Oh,
um,
wow.
talking about it. Yeah, yeah, pretty nice. Bev has
Interesting.
helped. I've worked with her for many years, so great to see them in there.
Cool.
Anyway,
Cool.
with that, yeah, it's Initiative 50, um, capping property taxes at this 4%. So the kind of weird part about this, we vote on property taxes at a local level, and what Initiative 50 will do is make it like a statewide vote. So it's saying every 2 years, we're going to do an average across the state of the valuations, the increase in property taxes. If that estimate is going to be 4% more, to a, and the statewide will say whether all of those local governments get to exceed the 4% or not. So you're voting on it at a statewide level all at once instead of all these little jurisdictions. So there's pros and cons to 50, but it did already secure the signatures last year. So it is on the ballot regardless.
Interesting. I think that's a really key component there that a lot of people aren't aware of, but I'm sure they're going to hear more about is that statewide voter approval is required for all local governments to retain and spend the excess. It'll be a one statewide ballot vote for all these local governments to decide to keep the money.
Yes, for that 2 year cycle. It's important to note that you don't wave it away all the time. This average that's gathered, all the data that's gathered, will occur every 2 years, and so voters could say, you know what, it's 4.1%. We're going to let them keep it because of whatever da 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 da. But it is capping it at a level that's very difficult for a citizen to do because we don't have the right to petition a lot of local governments. We cannot initiate a cap at our county level. We cannot initiate a cap at special district level. We can't, when I say initiate, I mean go out and get signatures. I can't go out to Jeffco schools and say, I want to cap property taxes so you're only getting 6% more per year or 4% or whatever. We don't have that right to petition. The only way to do it is at the statewide level. That's why 50 is doing it in this way. And think about how many signatures. I mean, a property tax bill we've talked about before, you've got a dozen agencies, units that are listed there. So to go after each one individually, I mean, you could spend a decade taking care of that. So
Yeah.
This is why 50 is doing it in this manner.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on 50. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about it as we get closer to the November election here. But there's another
Yeah.
one out there where they're trying to get signatures for. What's one initiative 108 about, Natalie?
108 is a little bit easier to describe. This one is changing the assessment rate and it goes to the 5.7. Double check here real quick. Yeah, 5.7% for residential assessments. And then everybody else, non-residential, is 24%. Now you see that in that chart we were talking about earlier that I got from DOLA, where they were saying, well, we're going to give you a little break in 2024 to go to 27.9, and then it goes back up to 29. So very short term. I mean, it's like an expert, very short shelf life for the relief there. Versus 108 is saying it's going to go to 5.7 and non-residential, so that's commercial, vacant land, all of these things that have not been getting much of a break, it will go down to 24 for the assessment rate. So this is more on the lines of meaningful relief. And that is up for circulation right now. There's a host of other petitions out there also, but the pretty easy one, I don't think there's any other property tax circulation. The opponents, including Scott Wasserman, who just left Ballot Policy Center to go start his own consulting firm, so he can get government contracts and do whatever he's going to do. I'm making the assumption. Maybe you won't do that, Scott. But anyway, Ballot Policy had threatened to do a couple tax hikes on property issues. And I don't think they're circulating those. They would have never had the money to do it anyway, or the interest who would do it. So it should be pretty easy when you're in front of a grocery store. If they say cutting property taxes, it's more than likely 108.
Very good to know. Yeah, definitely. I want to keep an eye out for those.
Yeah.
So briefly too, there was an article that came out in Colorado Politics, an opinion piece by Miller Hudson, talking a little bit about the conflict between expertise and common sense. That was kind of interesting. So people can check that out if they're interested. But of course, these experts, I think, continuously think they would know what's best for the people of Colorado. When homeowners, when consumers, taxpayers, people are just struggling to make ends meet, these experts, of course, always can rationalize ways for them to take more of our money and make us a little bit worse off for the greater good, as they would probably see it.
Yeah, I thought the reason that article was interesting to me, which just published today, opinion piece, that it talks about politicians neglecting citizens' experience so profoundly. It creates an illusion of a solution when government does something. Well, it goes back to government creates how many problems, and then the illusion of the solution. And are you really just a chess piece? Are you getting representation? Who is all involved? Is the lobbyist who's down at the Capitol the most the one who has a politician's ear the most? To me, that's what I kind of got out of this article.
Yeah, that's a
So
good point.
thank God for the citizen initiative, because if we're
Definitely.
dependent on the gold dome to do what needs to be done, it's generally not occurring as of late.
Right. And we've talked about this a lot last year, and people should reference those videos for sure. We know the solutions: the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, the annual levy law, get involved in your local governments, of course, lower those mill levy rates, uh, do everything you can through the initiative process as well. So there's tools out there for people. We don't have to be left up to our pocketbooks don't have to be continuously rated by these legislators as much as they wish they could be.
Yeah. So, there's going to be some interesting conversations about these initiatives. But at the end of the day, we certainly want to have the discussion in November. So sign the petition, because what is handed to us from the legislature is not enough. Just like the
Natalie,
sign said. Just like the sign said.
not enough. See you in November. Love it. Now,
Well,
Natalie, this image here of this free speech cage, what's the story with this?
yeah, it just goes to the whole thing of appreciating our right to petition. And it's not as easy as they like to say. Oh, I mean, until recently, they say, oh, you go down the 16th Street Mall, you get all your signatures in a week. It's not the way it works. So this reminds me, as I was searching for petition stuff, this is when the Gold Line commuter rail was opening in Arvada. We were circulating the petition for the national popular vote referendum, choice the legislature made, and we said, no, we want to vote on this. So we did. We were gathering signatures for this. We were, myself and a friend, set up a petition. I was actually our TV board director, so I was like supposed to be with opening events that day, but I was circulating the petition and was held up by cops, Wheat Ridge PD, because I was circulating a petition along with my friend Jimmy on what they called private property. even though it was public property owned by the taxpayers. They had expected apparently petitioners possibly. So they told me that I had to remove myself from and my friend and the table from like off the side of the sidewalk. We weren't blocking the sidewalk or anything. We're right to the side. And said we were supposed to go to this free speech cage, which is in the picture down here. We were like a block away where actually people were walking by and we would get signatures. And the cops told us we had to go to this free speech cage, which was this barricaded off area. And basically, I fought them. I said, no, this is not the way it works. This is taxpayer property. It's public land, it's my land. And we ended up staying. But the point to all of this is the right to petition is gold and it's attack, even though people don't think about it. And this is like a simple little example where instead of just like greeting people saying, hey, there's a train opening, would you like to sign, for something important? We were told to go a block away, or basically we were threatened with trespassing on, what they consider private property when the taxpayer owned it. We need to gain more of our right to petition. This is an example, but there's 100 others become so expensive to get something on the ballot. It's no wonder the average citizen has a hard time doing it. So it's a friendly reminder, folks. We need to restore, regain, improve our right to petition in Colorado. Otherwise, we continue to be, again, pawns in a game.
Yeah, well said, Natalie. 100%. So some big takeaways from this video: fight for that right to petition, keep that active, restored, like you said. Always fight for the taxpayers' bill of rights. Limit the government's ability to raise our taxes. Of course, is so important, and get involved. And yeah, and when these politicians come around this year, election time, saying that they've solved the property tax issue, that they're providing this meaningful property tax relief through Senate Bill 233. You have the information now to know that that is just not the case.
That's right.
So perfect. Well, Natalie, I look forward to talking to you again soon. Really appreciate you taking the time, and take care. We'll talk later.
Thank you, Brandon. It's always wonderful. And for anybody who made it all the way to this if you have not subscribed, subscribe to
Yep.
Brandon's channel.
Like, comment, share, subscribe. Definitely appreciate it. Always go to freestatecolorado.com for all the links. Of course, on Twitter, Facebook, Telegram, YouTube, Free State Colorado. So thanks, Natalie. Appreciate it. Take care.
All those options. Wow. You're the man. All right. Good night.
All right. Take care.